Zara's 4 eyes tracked the movement in the asteroid field with practiced precision. Her elongated fingers danced across the crystalline control interface of her scout ship, the Whisper of Stars. The Zilani had been exploring the galaxy for over 3,000 cycles, and in all that time they had never encountered a species quite as peculiar as the ones they were about to meet. The distress signal had been broadcasting for 2 standard days now, a crude electromagnetic pulse that barely registered on their advanced sensors. Most Zilani would have ignored it entirely. After all, any civilization still using such primitive communication methods was clearly beneath their notice. But Zara was different. She was what her people called a contact specialist, one of the few Zilani who studied lesser species for academic purposes. Computer, analysis of the signal source, she commanded in her native tongue, a series of harmonic tones that would sound like singing to most species. Vessel appears to be of unknown origin. Hull composition suggests metallic alloys. Estimated technological level, primitive. Recommend maintaining safe distance. Zara's mandibles clicked in amusement. The computer always recommended maintaining safe distance. It was programmed to be cautious, as were most Zilani. Her species had survived this long by avoiding unnecessary risks, by staying away from the chaotic mess that younger civilizations tended to create. But something about this signal intrigued her. The mathematical precision of the pulse intervals suggested intelligence, even if the technology was crude, and there was something else. A persistence to it that spoke of determination rather than desperation. She adjusted her ship's trajectory, moving closer to the source. Through the viewport she could see it now. A boxy, ungainly vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. Compared to the elegant curves of Zilani ships, it was almost offensive to look at. Yet it was still intact, still broadcasting, still fighting against the void. Fascinating, she murmured, switching to the trade language most species understood. Computer. Attempt to establish communication. The response came faster than expected. Not just a reply, but a flood of information. Audio-visual mathematical sequences, even what appeared to be cultural data. Whoever these beings were, they were eager to communicate. The first image that resolved on her screen made her recoil slightly. The creature was bipedal, which wasn't unusual, but its face was alarmingly symmetrical with only 2 eyes. Its skin was a pale color that seemed almost translucent, and sparse hair covered only the top of its head. But what struck her most was its expression. There was no fear in those strange eyes, only curiosity and something that might have been hope. "Greetings," came a voice through the translation matrix. The tone was surprisingly warm. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Perseverance. We're explorers from the Sol system, currently experiencing some technical difficulties. We detected your approach and wanted to make contact." Zara's throat sacs inflated with surprise. They had detected her approach? Her ship was supposed to be virtually undetectable to primitive sensors. Either their equipment was more advanced than it appeared, or these humans had some other way of perceiving her presence. "I am Scholar Zara Tell of the Zilani Confederation," she replied formally. "Your technology appears to be experiencing malfunctions. Do you require assistance?" The human's face split into what the translation matrix identified as a smile. Apparently a positive expression, though it looked rather alarming with all those visible teeth. "We'd appreciate any help you could offer," Sarah said. "We're pretty far from home and our jump drive took some damage from a solar flare. Nothing life-threatening, but we're kind of stuck until we can fix it." Zara found herself genuinely surprised by the human's casual attitude. In her experience, most species became either aggressively defensive or pathetically submissive when encountered by a more advanced civilization. These humans seemed to be treating this as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "I will dock with your vessel and assess the situation," Zara announced. "Already beginning the approach sequence. That's incredibly kind of you," Sarah replied. "Fair warning, though. Our artificial gravity might feel a bit heavy for your species. We're a pretty dense bunch." Dense? Zara's translation matrix was having trouble with some of the humans' word choices. Perhaps their language was more complex than it initially appeared. The docking process revealed just how primitive the human vessel truly was. There were no sophisticated magnetic clamps or energy fields, just a simple airlock that required manual adjustment. Yet somehow it worked perfectly. When Zara stepped through the airlock, she immediately understood what Sarah had meant about gravity. The humans had somehow generated a gravitational field nearly twice what her species was accustomed to. It should have been crushing, but somehow she found it merely uncomfortable. Sarah was waiting for her, and Zara was struck again by how unusual these creatures were. The human stood upright without any visible effort despite the intense gravity, and her movements were fluid and controlled. Most species that evolved in such conditions were either heavily muscled and slow, or had developed technological assistance for basic movement. "Welcome aboard the Perseverance," Sarah said, extending her hand in what the translation matrix identified as a greeting gesture. When Zara tentatively touched the offered appendage, she was surprised by the firmness of the grip, and by the fact that the human skin was radiating heat like a small furnace. "Your body temperature appears to be quite elevated," Zara observed. "Are you ill?" Sarah laughed. Another expression that the translation matrix marked as positive but which sounded rather harsh to Zalani ears. "No, we just run hot. Comes from being warm-blooded, I guess. Our homeworld is pretty cold compared to what most species prefer." As Sarah led her through the ship's corridors, Zara noticed more oddities. The humans had covered the walls with images. Not functional displays or status indicators, but pictures of what appeared to be other humans, landscapes, and various objects. When she asked about them, Sarah explained they were photographs, captured moments that the crew wanted to remember. "Why would you want to be constantly reminded of things that are no longer present?" Zara asked. Sarah paused, considering the question. "I guess because those moments matter to us. The people we love, the places we've been, the things we've accomplished, they're part of who we are." The concept was foreign to Zara. Zalani society focused on the present and the future. The past was simply data to be analyzed and learned from, not something to be emotionally attached to. They reached the engineering section, where Zara got her first look at human technology in action. It was indeed primitive by Zalani standards, but there was something impressive about its robustness. Every system had multiple backups, manual overrides, and what humans apparently called redundancies. It was as if they had designed everything expecting it to fail. "Your people seem to have little faith in your technology," Zara observed. "Oh, we have plenty of faith in it," Sarah replied, running her hand along a particularly complex-looking console. "We just know that everything breaks eventually. The trick is making sure that when it does break, it fails safely and can be fixed." This philosophy was completely opposite to Zalani engineering, where systems were designed to never fail in the first place. Yet looking at this ship, which had clearly been through considerable hardship and was still functioning, Zara had to admit there was something to be said for the human approach. As she began examining their damaged jump drive, Zara realized that her encounter with these strange beings was going to be far more educational than she had initially expected. The jump drive was a mess. Zara had seen damaged equipment before, but never anything quite like this. The humans had apparently continued operating it well past the point where any sane engineer would have shut it down completely. Crystalline matrices were cracked, power conduits were fused, and the entire assembly was held together with what appeared to be metallic tape. "How is this device still functional?" she asked, genuinely perplexed. The human engineer, who had introduced himself as Marcus, grinned and patted the machine affectionately. "She's a tough old bird. We've been nursing her along for about 6 months now, ever since we left the Kepler system." 6 months. Zara's vocal cords produced a sound of disbelief. "You have been traveling in space for 6 months with a damaged faster-than-light drive." "Well, when you put it like that, it does sound a bit crazy," Marcus admitted. "But we're explorers. This is what we do. We go places no human has gone before, and sometimes that means taking risks." Zara examined the drive more closely. The damage was extensive but not irreparable. With the right components, she could have it functioning properly within a few hours. The problem was that the necessary parts would need to be fabricated using technology the humans didn't possess. "I can repair this," she told them. "However, I will need to return to my ship for the appropriate tools and materials." "That would be amazing," Sarah said. "Is there anything we can offer in return?" "We don't have much in the way of advanced technology, but we'd be happy to share what we have." The offer intrigued Zara. In her experience, primitive species usually had little to offer more advanced civilizations, but these humans had already surprised her several times, so perhaps it would be worth investigating. What do you consider your most valuable resource? She asked. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. Honestly, probably our databases, Sarah said. We've been collecting information about every system we've visited. Stellar cartography, mineral surveys, biological samples, cultural observations. It might not be cutting-edge science, but it's all first-hand data from places that haven't been explored before. Zara's interest piqued. Raw exploration data was always valuable, especially from regions that hadn't been thoroughly mapped. I would be interested in examining these databases. Over the next few hours, as Zara shuttled back and forth between the ships gathering repair materials, she found herself spending more and more time simply talking with the humans. They seemed genuinely curious about her species, asking questions that revealed a surprising depth of thought. Your ship is incredibly advanced, Marcus observed as he watched her work. The materials alone are beyond anything we've ever seen. Your people must have been traveling the stars for a very long time. Over 3,000 cycles, Zara confirmed. The Zalani achieved interstellar travel when your species was still confined to your homeworld. What was it like? Sarah asked. The first time your people encountered another intelligent species? The question caught Zara off guard. She had to think back through historical records to answer it. It was cautious. We observed them for several cycles before making contact. When we finally revealed ourselves, it was through carefully controlled diplomatic channels. That makes sense, Marcus nodded. First contact is a pretty big deal. Lots of ways it could go wrong. Indeed. The Zalani have learned that it is wise to approach new species gradually, to assess their level of development and their intentions before revealing our capabilities. Sarah tilted her head. But you approached us directly. Why was that? Zara paused in her work. It was a good question, and she realized she didn't have a completely rational answer. Your signal was persistent, and there was something about your ship's design that suggested pragmatism rather than aggression. Pragmatism, Marcus laughed. That's one way to describe it. Most people just call it ugly. Function over form has its own aesthetic value, Zara replied diplomatically. As she continued working, Zara became aware that other members of the human crew were approaching to observe her repairs. They maintained a respectful distance, but their curiosity was obvious. She found their attention oddly comfortable rather than intrusive. How many of you are aboard this vessel? She asked. 12, Sarah replied. Small crew for a long-range exploration mission. But we've found that smaller groups work better for extended isolation. Less chance of personality conflicts. 12 individuals, traveling for months or even years in the confined space of this ship, far from their homeworld and any possibility of rescue if something went seriously wrong. The concept was alien to Zara. Zalani exploration vessels typically carried hundreds of crew members and maintained constant communication with the Confederation. Are you not concerned about the risks? She asked. Of course we are, Sarah said simply, but the risks are worth it. Every new system we explore, every piece of data we collect, every contact we make, it all adds to the sum of human knowledge. Future generations will benefit from what we learn out here. The idea that beings would risk their lives for knowledge that might benefit individuals they would never meet was, fascinating to Zara. Zalani certainly valued knowledge, but they approached its acquisition much more systematically and safely. A soft chime from her tools indicated that the first phase of repairs was complete. She began the delicate process of realigning the drive's quantum matrices, work that required absolute precision. To her surprise, Marcus was able to follow her explanations of what she was doing, even asking intelligent questions about the theoretical principles involved. Your people have a better understanding of hyperspace physics than your technology would suggest, she observed. We're good at theory, Marcus explained. It's the practical application that gives us trouble. We understand how these things should work. We just don't have the materials or manufacturing techniques to build them properly. As if to demonstrate his point, one of the human's own repair attempts chose that moment to fail. A cascade of sparks erupted from a nearby console, filling the air with acrid smoke. Instead of panic, the humans responded with practiced efficiency. Someone shut off power to the affected system while another crew member appeared with a fire suppression device. Sorry about that, Marcus said calmly, as if equipment failures were just part of normal operations. Jensen's been nursing that power coupling for weeks. I guess it finally gave up. Within minutes, they had the situation under control and were already planning a workaround. Zara watched with growing amazement as they collaborated to solve the problem, each contributing their expertise without any apparent hierarchy or conflict. "Does your equipment fail this frequently?" she asked. "Pretty much," Sarah admitted cheerfully. "That's what happens when you push everything to its limits. But we're good at fixing things. Have to be, when the nearest repair facility is several light years away." The casual acceptance of constant mechanical problems as a normal part of life was something Zara had never encountered before. Most species either developed reliable technology before venturing into space, or they didn't venture into space at all. These humans seemed to have decided that unreliable technology was better than no space travel at all. By the time she finished the jump drive repairs, Zara had observed the humans dealing with 3 more equipment failures, 2 minor injuries, and what appeared to be a heated debate about the proper way to prepare something they called coffee. In each case, they handled the situation with competence and good humor, treating problems as challenges to be solved rather than disasters to be feared. "There," she announced, stepping back from the drive assembly, "your faster-than-light capability has been restored. The modifications I made should also improve your operational efficiency by approximately 15%. The celebration that followed was unlike anything in Zara's experience. The humans didn't just express gratitude. They insisted on sharing their food with her, playing music and telling stories about their previous adventures. It was chaotic and illogical and strangely warming. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself genuinely reluctant to return to her own ship. There was something infectious about the humans' enthusiasm and camaraderie that made her solitary existence seem suddenly empty. The alarm that woke Zara from her sleep cycle was not from her own ship. The harsh mechanical wailing was distinctly human in origin, and it carried an urgency that made her throat sacs contract with concern. She had remained docked with the Perseverance overnight, partly to monitor her repairs and partly because she had found the humans' company unexpectedly enjoyable. Now, as she hurried through the connecting airlock, she found the human ship in chaos. Red emergency lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, and crew members were running through the corridors with purposeful haste. The organized panic was impressive. There was no screaming, no visible terror, just focused activity. She found Sarah on the bridge, standing before a display that showed something that made Zara's blood chill. 3 ships were approaching fast, their configuration unmistakably Korthak. The sight of those angular predatory vessels brought back memories from her childhood, stories her parents had told her about the galaxy's most feared raiders. "How long until they reach us?" Sarah was asking her tactical officer. 18 minutes at current velocity," came the reply. "They're definitely military configuration. Heavy armor, multiple weapon systems." Sarah noticed Zara's arrival and quickly explained the situation. "Our long-range sensors picked them up about 10 minutes ago. We're not sure if they're responding to our earlier distress signal or if this is just bad luck. You must leave immediately," Zara said urgently. "Those are Korthak vessels. They are raiders, slavers, destroyers of worlds. Your ship cannot possibly survive an encounter with them." "Can your ship?" Marcus asked, appearing at Sarah's shoulder. Zara's mandibles clicked nervously. "My vessel is fast and well shielded, but it is not designed for combat. Against 3 Korthak raiders," she paused, calculating odds. "I might be able to escape if I left immediately." The word "if" hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everyone understood the implication. Zara could flee, but only if she abandoned the humans to their fate. "You should go," Sarah said quietly. "There's no reason for you to stay and die with us." The casual acceptance of death in her voice shocked Zara. "You are not even attempting to flee?" "With what?" Marcus gestured at the engineering displays. "Our jump drive is working now thanks to you, but it needs time to charge. Our regular engines can't outrun military vessels. We're stuck." Zara stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The logical choice was obvious. Save herself and report the incident to Zilani authorities. The humans would be captured or killed, their ship destroyed or taken as salvage, but that was the nature of the galaxy. Primitive species that ventured beyond their borders without adequate protection were simply fulfilling their evolutionary destiny. But, as she looked around the bridge at these strange beings who had welcomed her so warmly, who had shared their food and stories and dreams with her, She found that logic felt cold and distant. There is another option, she heard herself saying. Your ship cannot outrun them, but it might be able to hide. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Hide where? We're in open space. Behind my vessel, Zara explained, her mind working furiously. Zilani ships employ sophisticated sensor masking technology. If you positioned your ship correctly in my sensor shadow, the Korthak might not detect you immediately. Might not? Marcus repeated. It would depend on many factors. The quality of their equipment, their scanning patterns, whether they were specifically looking for multiple vessels. Zara paused. It is not a guarantee. It is merely a possibility. And what happens to you? Sarah asked. If they detect your ship, I will tell them I am conducting a routine survey mission. The Korthak generally avoid conflict with the Zilani Confederation, unless the potential rewards are substantial. A single scout ship would not be worth the diplomatic complications. It was a reasonable plan, Zara told herself. It might even work. But there was one problem she hadn't mentioned. If the Korthak discovered the human ship, they would know she had been lying. And the Korthak dealt with liars in very unpleasant ways. It's too dangerous for you, Sarah said, as if reading her thoughts. We can't ask you to take that risk. You are not asking, Zara replied. I am offering. The next 15 minutes were a flurry of activity as both ships maneuvered into position. The humans proved remarkably adept at precise flying, managing to tuck their bulky vessel into the sensor shadow of Zara's sleek scout ship, with minimal thruster signatures that might give them away. Power down all non-essential systems, Zara instructed over the communication channel. Minimal life support only. You must be as quiet as possible. From her own bridge, Zara watched the Korthak ships approach. They were beautiful in their own deadly way, like metallic predators evolved for killing. She had seen such vessels in museums and historical records, but never up close and active. The lead ship was now close enough for detailed scanning. Zara forced her breathing to remain steady as she transmitted the standard Zilani identification codes. Unknown vessel, this is Raid Leader Vrak of the Korthak 3rd Fleet, came the response. The translator rendered the voices harsh and commanding. State your purpose in this sector. I am Scholar Zaratel of the Zilani Confederation, she replied formally. I am conducting a routine stellar survey mission under the terms of the Galactic Exploration Accords. There was a pause while the Korthak apparently checked her credentials. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she waited, knowing that behind her 12 human lives hung in the balance. Your credentials appear to be in order, Vrak finally responded. Have you detected any other vessels in this area? The question she had been dreading. If she lied and they discovered the truth, both she and the humans would die. If she told the truth, the humans would die anyway. But if she lied convincingly enough, I detected some electromagnetic emissions approximately 2 days ago, she said carefully. Primitive signals, probably from a damaged vessel. I investigated but found only debris. It appeared that whatever ship had been there had suffered a catastrophic failure. Another pause, longer this time. Zara could almost feel the Korthak sensor sweeping the area, searching for any sign of deception. Our own sensors detected similar emissions, Vrak said slowly. You claim the vessel was destroyed? The debris field was consistent with a complete structural failure, Zara lied smoothly. I collected some samples for analysis, but there was nothing of value remaining. She transmitted a carefully edited sensor log, showing the debris she had actually observed from other ships in this region during her previous surveys. To anyone not conducting a detailed investigation, it would appear to support her story. Very well, Vrak said after reviewing the data. We will investigate the debris field ourselves. You may continue your survey mission. Zara's relief was almost overwhelming, but she forced herself to maintain composure. Acknowledged. Thank you for your courtesy, Raid Leader. She watched the Korthak ships move away toward the false coordinates she had provided, where they would indeed find old debris that matched her story. By the time they realized the deception, both ships would be long gone. Only when the raiders had disappeared completely from her sensors did she signal the Perseverance. You can power up now, she told. Sarah, they are gone. The response was immediate and joyous. Human voices filled the communication channel, expressing gratitude and amazement in equal measure. But underneath their relief, Zara detected something else, a recognition of what had just occurred. You lied to them, Sarah said quietly. once the initial celebration had died down. "You put yourself at risk to protect us." It seemed like the logical course of action, Zara replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "No," Sarah said firmly. "Logic would have been to save yourself. What you did was something else entirely." As Zara contemplated the human captain's words, she realized that something fundamental had changed in her understanding of the galaxy. For 3,000 cycles, the Zilani had survived by being careful, logical, risk-averse. They had built a stable, peaceful civilization by avoiding the chaos that seemed to follow younger species. But in protecting these humans, she had felt something she had never experienced before, a willingness to risk everything for beings she barely knew. It was illogical, dangerous, and completely contrary to everything she had been taught. It was also, she was beginning to suspect, essential to understanding what made some species survive and others merely exist. The journey to the Kepler system took 3 days, with both ships traveling in formation. Zara had initially planned to part ways with the humans after the Korthak encounter, but Sarah had extended an invitation that proved impossible to refuse. "We're heading to investigate some unusual readings from Kepler 442b, Sarah had explained. "It might be worth documenting from a scientific perspective. Would you be interested in joining us?" The planet was indeed unusual. As they approached the system, Zara's sensors revealed something that made her question her initial readings. The fourth planet showed clear signs of industrial civilization, geometric patterns visible from orbit, electromagnetic emissions, even what appeared to be orbital installations. But according to the galactic database, this system had been surveyed centuries ago and found to contain no intelligent life. "That's definitely artificial," Marcus confirmed, studying the human ship's sensor data. "Those structures are too regular to be natural formations. How could an entire civilization have been missed by previous surveys?" Zara wondered aloud. "Maybe they weren't missed," Sarah said grimly. "Maybe they were ignored." As they entered orbit, the truth became clear. The planet below showed signs of recent devastation, cities reduced to rubble, orbital platforms drifting as debris, and vast areas of the surface scarred by what could only be weapons fire. But there were also signs of life, scattered settlements that appeared to be struggling to rebuild. "Korthak," Zara said, recognizing the destruction patterns. "This world was raided, probably within the last standard year." The communication request came from the planet's surface almost immediately. The translator struggled with the language for several minutes before finally producing comprehensible speech. "Unknown vessels, please identify yourselves. We do not have much left to defend ourselves with." The voice carried exhaustion and fear, but also a desperate hope. Sarah responded immediately. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Perseverance. We're explorers, not raiders. We detected signs of damage and wanted to offer assistance if possible." There was a long pause before the response came. "You are not Korthak?" "Definitely not Korthak," Sarah assured them. "We're traveling with a Zilani scientist. We're here peacefully, Zilani." The voice seemed to brighten slightly. "The Confederation ships came to our aid during the attack, but they were too few and arrived too late." "You are with them?" Zara found herself unexpectedly moved by the hope in the alien voice. "I am Scholar Zaratel," she transmitted. "What is the status of your population?" "I am Communications Coordinator Thex of the Vrinan Republic," came the reply. "Our population has been reduced. The raiders took many of our people as slaves. Others died defending our cities. We are perhaps 1/10 of our former numbers." The scale of the tragedy was staggering. An entire civilization nearly wiped out by raiders, while the rest of the galaxy continued about its business. "What can we do to help?" Sarah asked without hesitation. Zara stared at the human captain in amazement. Here was a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel, offering aid to a world they had never heard of to people they had never met. The next several hours were spent in orbit-to-surface coordination. The Vrinan were indeed desperate. Their medical facilities were overwhelmed, their infrastructure was failing, and they were struggling to provide basic necessities for their remaining population. "We need to go down there," Sarah announced after reviewing the situation reports. "That would be extremely inadvisable," Zara replied automatically. "The surface conditions are dangerous. The local population may harbor diseases your immune systems cannot handle, and there is no guarantee of safe passage." "Since when do humans worry about safe passage?" Marcus asked with a grin. It was a good point. In the 3 days she had spent with them, Zara had observed that humans seemed to treat danger as a minor inconvenience rather than a serious deterrent. Besides, Sarah added, they need help now. We have medical supplies, emergency rations, and technical expertise. We can't just leave them to die while we debate the risks. Against her better judgment, Zara found herself agreeing to accompany a landing party to the surface. The shuttle ride down was harrowing. The planet's orbital defenses had been destroyed, leaving debris fields that required careful navigation. The landing site was a settlement called New Haven, which had apparently been hastily constructed from the salvage of a larger city. The Vreenan who greeted them were humanoid in basic structure, but covered in fine scales that shifted color based on their emotional state. Currently, most of them were displaying patterns that the translator interpreted as cautious hope. Coordinator Thex was a tall, elegant being whose scales currently showed deep blue patterns of gratitude. You cannot know what your arrival means to us, she said as she led them through the settlement. We had begun to believe that the galaxy had forgotten us entirely. The tour of New Haven was both inspiring and heartbreaking. The Vreenan had managed to create a functioning community from practically nothing, using salvaged materials and improvised technology. But the cost was evident everywhere. Families with empty spaces where members had been taken or killed, children who stared at strangers with the wariness of those who had seen too much horror too young. What struck Zara most was how the humans responded. They didn't just offer assistance. They rolled up their sleeves and started working. Marcus began teaching Vreenan engineers how to jury-rig more efficient power systems. Dr. Kim, the Perseverance's medical officer, set up treatment stations for the injured. Other crew members helped with construction, food distribution, and childcare. Your companions are remarkable, Thex observed as they watched Sarah organizing a work detail to repair damaged water purification systems. Most species offer sympathy and material aid. Few offer themselves. Zara had been thinking the same thing. The logical response to the Vreenan situation would be to provide supplies and technical assistance, then move on. Actually, staying to help with manual labor was inefficient and potentially dangerous. But as the day progressed, she found herself drawn into the work as well. Her technical knowledge proved valuable in repairing damaged systems, and her ship's fabrication capabilities could produce components the Vreenan couldn't manufacture themselves. By evening, the improvements to the settlement were visible. Power was more reliable, water was cleaner, and several critical systems that had been failing were now operational. But more than that, the Vreenan themselves seemed different. Their scales showed brighter patterns, and there was an energy in their movements that hadn't been there before. Hope, Thex explained when Zara commented on the change. For months we have simply been surviving, trying to make it through each day. Today, for the first time since the attack, we feel like we might actually have a future. That night, as the two crews shared a meal with their hosts, Zara listened to the conversations flowing around her. The humans were already making plans for long-term assistance, supply routes, technical training programs, defensive strategies. They weren't just helping, they were investing in these people's future. Why do you do this? She asked Sarah during a quiet moment. Your ship is small, your resources are limited. Why commit so much to beings you barely know? Sarah considered the question seriously. I guess because we've been where they are, she said finally. Maybe not exactly the same situation, but close enough. Humanity has faced extinction events, devastating wars, disasters that seemed impossible to survive. We know what it's like to need help and hope that someone will care enough to provide it. And someone always did? Not always, Sarah admitted. Sometimes we had to save ourselves. But often enough, when things looked darkest, help came from unexpected places. Maybe it was other humans, maybe it was just luck, but somehow we kept going. I guess we figured that if the universe was good enough to help us survive, we should pass that favor along. The concept was alien to Zara's experience, but she was beginning to understand it. The humans didn't help because it was logical or profitable or safe. They helped because they remembered what it felt like to need help. As she prepared to return to her ship that night, Coordinator Thex approached her. Scholar Zaratel, may I ask you something? Of course. These humans, are they typical of their species? Zara thought about everything she had observed over the past few days. The casual courage, the willingness to take risks for others, the ability to find hope in desperate situations. I believe they are, she said slowly, though I'm only beginning to understand what that means. Thex's scales shifted to a pattern the translator identified as deep respect. Then the galaxy is a more dangerous place than we knew. Dangerous? Why do you say that? Because, Thex replied, any species that will risk everything to help strangers will also risk everything to defend their friends. The Korthak destroyed our world because they believed we were weak and defenseless. If they make the same mistake with humanity... She didn't finish the sentence, but Zara understood the implication. The humans' compassion and their capacity for violence might spring from the same source. An absolute refusal to accept defeat when something they cared about was threatened. For the first time since leaving Zilani space, Zara found herself wondering what would happen when humanity encountered something they couldn't help, couldn't save, couldn't fix with courage and determination alone. She suspected the galaxy was about to find out. The distress call reached them while they were still in the Vrenan system, helping to establish supply routes and defensive protocols. It was a broad-spectrum emergency transmission, the kind that meant either technical disaster or enemy action. When the translation matrix finally processed the signal, the message was chillingly simple. This is the Zilani Research Station, Bright Horizon. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Repeat, we are under attack. Please send immediate assistance. Zara's throat sacs contracted with shock. Bright Horizon was one of the Confederation's most advanced research facilities, studying exotic matter physics in a heavily protected system. For it to be under attack was nearly unthinkable. How far? Sarah asked immediately, already moving toward the bridge. Approximately 8 hours at maximum speed, Zara replied, her fingers dancing over her ship's navigation systems. But Sarah, this is not your concern. This is a Zilani matter. Sarah paused at the airlock entrance. Are there civilians on that station? Yes, several hundred researchers and their families. Then it's our concern too. Within 30 minutes, both ships were underway, pushing their engines to the limit. Zara found herself amazed yet again at the human response. They didn't hesitate, didn't calculate odds or potential benefits. They simply went where help was needed. During the journey, they received intermittent updates from Bright Horizon. The situation was worse than initially reported. The attackers weren't raiders or pirates. They were the hegemony, a militaristic alliance that had been expanding aggressively along the galaxy's rim. Somehow they had penetrated deep into Zilani space and were systematically destroying research installations. Why would they target scientific stations? Marcus wondered aloud as they reviewed the tactical reports. Information warfare, Zara explained grimly. The hegemony believes that advanced technology gives them the right to rule over less developed species. They're trying to ensure that no one else can achieve parity with their military capabilities. The final transmission from Bright Horizon came 6 hours into their journey. Station defenses have failed. Hegemony forces are boarding. We are implementing data destruction protocols. If anyone receives this message, do not attempt rescue. The situation is hopeless. End transmission. The silence that followed was deafening. Zara stared at her communications display, feeling a cold emptiness spreading through her chest. She knew many of the researchers on Bright Horizon personally. Colleagues, friends, people who had dedicated their lives to expanding the boundaries of knowledge. How long until we reach the system? Sarah's voice cut through her despair. Approximately 2 hours. Good. That gives us time to plan. Zara turned to stare at the human captain. Plan what? You heard the transmission. The station has fallen. There is nothing left to rescue. Maybe not the station, Sarah admitted, but there might be survivors. And even if there aren't, the hegemony forces might still be there. We can gather intelligence, maybe disrupt their operations. With 2 small ships against a hegemony fleet? Zara's voice rose in disbelief. That would be suicide. Probably, Sarah agreed calmly. But sitting here doing nothing definitely won't help anyone. Over the next 2 hours, Zara watched the humans transform their exploration vessel into something resembling a warship. They had no military weapons, but they improvised with frightening creativity. Mining charges became improvised missiles. Industrial cutting tools were modified into short-range beam weapons. Even their scientific sensors were reconfigured to act as targeting systems. This is insane, Zara muttered as she observed the preparations. Yep, Marcus replied cheerfully. Not looking up from the weapon he was jury-rigging. But it's the good kind of insane. When they reached the Bright Horizon system, what they found was even worse than expected. The research station was a drifting hulk, its elegant curves blackened by weapons fire. But worse, 3 hegemony warships were still present, apparently cataloging salvage from the wreckage. There, Sarah pointed at the tactical display. Those could be escape pods, she was right. Scattered throughout the system were dozens of small objects that might be emergency evacuation craft. Some were moving under their own power, others drifting helplessly. All were being systematically hunted by hegemony patrol craft. We have to help them, Sarah said. How? Zara demanded. Those warships will destroy us the moment we're detected. But the humans were already moving, their plans apparently formed during the journey. The Perseverance began broadcasting a false distress signal, claiming to be a civilian transport experiencing engine failure. Meanwhile, Zara's ship used its superior stealth capabilities to approach the escape pods. The plan was audacious and probably suicidal. The humans would draw the attention of the hegemony ships while Zara rescued as many survivors as possible. When the deception was discovered, both ships would attempt to flee, though their chances of outrunning military vessels were minimal. You don't have to do this, Zara told Sarah over the communication link as they prepared to separate. Yes, we do, Sarah replied simply. This is what humans do. The next hour was the longest of Zara's life. She watched from her hiding place among the asteroid debris as the Perseverance played a deadly game of deception with the hegemony fleet. The humans were brilliant actors, their distress calls perfectly pitched to sound like frightened civilians. They even allowed the enemy ships to approach closely before discovering a critical system failure that required immediate attention. While the hegemony vessels were focused on what they assumed was easy prey, Zara moved between the escape pods, rescuing survivors. The stories they told were horrific. The attack had come without warning, overwhelming the station's defenses in minutes. Many escape pods had been destroyed immediately, their occupants killed before they could even call for help. Scholar Zaratel, the voice belonged to Dr. Veltar, one of the senior researchers. How did you find us? We thought everyone had abandoned the system. I did not come alone, Zara explained as she helped the injured physicist aboard her ship. There are others here creating a distraction so we can rescue survivors. Others? Who would risk themselves for a lost cause? Before Zara could answer, alarms began blaring throughout her ship. The hegemony had finally realized they were being deceived, and their response was swift and brutal. 3 heavily armed warships converged on the Perseverance, weapons charging for what would certainly be a killing blow. What happened next defied everything Zara thought she knew about space combat. Instead of fleeing or surrendering, the human ship accelerated directly toward the largest hegemony vessel. At the last possible moment, it released every improvised weapon it carried: mining charges, modified torpedoes, even pieces of salvaged debris launched at relativistic speeds. The explosion, when the charges detonated against the enemy ship's shields, was visible across the entire system. But more than that, it had created a gap in the hegemony formation, a narrow window through which both ships might escape. All survivors aboard, Zara transmitted. Initiating jump sequence. Negative, came Sarah's reply. We're showing critical damage to our jump drive. You'll have to go without us. Through her sensors, Zara could see the truth of the situation. The Perseverance was badly damaged, venting atmosphere and debris. Even if the jump drive were functional, the humans had expended so much energy in their attack that they didn't have power for interstellar travel. The logical choice was clear. Zara had rescued 43 survivors from certain death. The mission was a success. Staying to help the humans would only result in more deaths and no additional benefit. But logic, Zara was discovering, was sometimes inadequate. Hold position, she transmitted to the human ship. I'm coming back for you. Negative. You have civilians aboard. Get them to safety. The survivors will be fine, Zara replied, already turning her ship around. My vessel has excellent life support systems, but you will all die if I leave you here. What followed was the most terrifying 15 minutes of Zara's life. Using every trick she had learned about stealth and evasion, she managed to approach the damaged human ship, while the hegemony vessels were still dealing with their own battle damage. The docking procedure was complicated by the Perseverance's structural damage, but somehow they managed to establish a connection. Everyone aboard, Sarah ordered her crew. Move, move, move. 12 humans raced through the airlock as hegemony sensors began to lock onto Zara's position. The last person through was Sarah herself, carrying an injured crew member who couldn't walk. Jump drive charged, Zara announced, initiating escape sequence. The hyperspace transition felt different this time, rougher, more violent than usual. Zara realized that her ship was carrying nearly 3 times its normal passenger load, straining systems that had never been designed for such numbers, but it held together, carrying them all to safety. In the hours that followed, as they flew toward the nearest Zilani outpost, Zara found herself in the ship's common area, surrounded by humans and Zilani working together to treat the injured and process what had happened. The barriers between the species seemed to have dissolved entirely in the face of shared danger and mutual rescue. "Thank you," Dr. Veltar said to Sarah, as the human medic finished treating his injuries. "You risked everything to save people you didn't even know." The Zilani Confederation Council chamber had not seen such a gathering in over 500 cycles. Representatives from dozens of species filled the crystalline amphitheater, their various forms creating a tapestry of biological diversity. But today all attention was focused on the small group at the center, Zara, the human crew of the Perseverance, and the survivors they had rescued from Bright Horizon. Zara stood before the council of speakers, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. These were the most powerful and influential beings in Zilani space, individuals whose decisions affected billions of lives across hundreds of worlds, and she was about to ask them to do something unprecedented. "Honored speakers," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "I stand before you today not just as a scholar of the Confederation, but as someone who has witnessed something extraordinary. Something that has changed my understanding of what it means to be part of the galactic community." She gestured toward Sarah and her crew. "These beings represent humanity, a species that achieved interstellar travel only recently. By our standards, they are primitives. Their technology is crude, their ships are inefficient, their weapons are improvised. Yet in the past weeks, they have demonstrated something we have nearly forgotten." "And what is that, Scholar Zaratel?" asked Speaker Morden, his ancient voice carrying centuries of accumulated wisdom. "They have demonstrated that advancement is not measured solely by technology or longevity. It is measured by the willingness to act when action is needed, regardless of personal cost." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. This was dangerous territory, questioning the fundamental assumptions upon which Zilani civilization was built. "You speak of the rescue at Bright Horizon," Speaker Mordoon continued. "We have reviewed the reports. The humans' actions were indeed brave, but they were also reckless. They could have been killed, and then the survivors would have died anyway. But they weren't killed," Zara replied firmly. "And 43 researchers are alive today because these primitives were willing to risk everything to save them." She activated a holographic display showing the tactical situation during the rescue. "The hegemony attack on our research stations was not random. It was the beginning of a systematic campaign to eliminate any species capable of technological advancement. They have already destroyed facilities in 3 systems. Bright Horizon was just the latest target." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony wasn't content with raiding and conquest. They were trying to prevent any other species from ever challenging their dominance. "What do you propose we do?" asked Speaker Yelnara, her tone carefully neutral. "I propose that we stop hiding behind our shields and our protocols," Zara said, her voice growing stronger. "I propose that we remember what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves." The silence that followed was deafening. For 3,000 cycles, the Zilani had survived by avoiding conflicts, by being too cautious and too advanced to be worth attacking. The idea of actively opposing the hegemony was almost unthinkable. "The humans have offered to share their intelligence about hegemony forces," Zara continued. "They have tactical data from their encounter, strategic assessments of enemy capabilities, and something else. They have the will to act on that information." Speaker Morden leaned forward. "Are you suggesting an alliance with a species that has barely left its homeworld?" "I am suggesting," Zara replied carefully, "that we might learn something from them." At that moment, Sarah stepped forward. The human captain had been silent throughout the proceedings, but now she requested permission to address the council. "Honored speakers," Sarah began, Scholar Zaratel has spoken of what humanity might offer the Confederation, but I think she's missed the most important point. The Chamber's attention focused on the small human figure, standing before the assembled might of galactic civilization. This isn't about what we can offer each other, Sarah continued. This is about what we owe to everyone who comes after us. The hegemony isn't just targeting advanced civilizations. They're making sure that no civilization will ever have the chance to become advanced. She gestured to the holographic display. Right now, there are probably a dozen species taking their first steps into space. They're building their first interstellar ships, making their first contact with other worlds, dreaming of joining the galactic community. The hegemony wants to make sure those dreams never come true. Her voice grew harder. In our region of space, there's a saying, evil triumphs when good people do nothing. You can hide behind your shields and your protocols while the hegemony systematically destroys every species that might someday challenge them. Or you can stand up and fight for the idea that the galaxy should belong to everyone, not just the strongest. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some speakers argued for traditional Zilani caution, others for limited engagement, still others for complete isolation. But gradually a consensus began to emerge, not around any specific action, but around the recognition that inaction was itself a choice, and not necessarily the safest one. Finally, Speaker Morden called for order. The Council will recess to consider these matters. In the meantime, Scholar Zaratel, you and your human companions are welcome to remain as our guests. As the session ended, and the various delegates began to disperse, Zara found herself surrounded by colleagues and fellow scholars. Their questions came in a rapid stream. Is it true that humans will risk their lives for complete strangers? How do they make decisions so quickly without extensive analysis? What drives them to act when logic suggests caution? But the question that stuck with her came from Dr. Veltar, one of the survivors from Bright Horizon. Zara, what changed in you? When you first started studying humans, you approached them like any other primitive species. Now you speak of them like they're our teachers. Zara considered the question carefully. I think, she said slowly, that I learned the difference between being advanced and being evolved. We Zilani have advanced technology, advanced science, advanced society, but the humans have evolved something we lost along the way, the ability to act on our conscience even when it's inconvenient or dangerous. That evening, as Zara walked through the gardens of the council complex, she found Sarah sitting alone by one of the reflecting pools. The human looked tired and somehow smaller than she had during the rescue operations. Doubts? Zara asked, settling beside her. Always, Sarah admitted. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. What if we're pushing your people into a war they're not ready for? What if our involvement makes things worse instead of better? What if doing nothing makes things worse? Zara countered. Sarah smiled ruefully. That's what Marcus would say. Actually, that's pretty much what he did say when I talked to him about it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the artificial stars reflected in the pool's surface. Finally, Sarah spoke again. Zara, can I ask you something? Of course. When you decided to help us hide from the Korthak, what were you thinking? I mean, what actually went through your mind in that moment? Zara thought back to that terrifying encounter, trying to remember her exact thoughts. I think, she said slowly, that for the first time in my life I was more afraid of what would happen if I did nothing than of what would happen if I acted. That's interesting, Sarah said. Because that's exactly what fear feels like to a human. Fear? The good kind of fear. The kind that makes you want to protect something instead of just protecting yourself. As they sat there, a message arrived on Zara's personal communicator. The council had reached a preliminary decision. A joint task force would be established, combining Zilani technology with human tactics and determination. It would be small at first, just a few ships, but it would be a beginning. So, Sarah said after reading the message, it looks like we're going to war. Yes, Zara replied, and for the first time since this all began, I'm not afraid of what that means. Looking back, she would mark that moment as the turning point. Not just in the conflict with the hegemony, but in her understanding of what it meant to be part of something larger than herself. The humans had taught her that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible. More importantly, they had taught her that the true measure of a civilization wasn't its technology or its longevity, but its willingness to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Tomorrow, they would begin planning for a war that none of them wanted, but all of them knew was necessary. Tonight, for the first time since leaving her homeworld, Scholar Zaratel felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months after the Council's decision, the Joint Task Force had grown from a handful of ships to a fleet of over 200 vessels. Representatives from 17 different species had joined what was now being called the Alliance of Free Worlds, each bringing their own unique capabilities to the fight against hegemony expansion. Zara stood on the bridge of the Harmony, the flagship of the combined fleet, watching the final preparations for what would either be the most important battle in galactic history or a spectacular disaster. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, Zelani technology providing the framework, human tactical systems directing the weapons, Vrenon defensive shields, and propulsion systems contributed by a dozen other species. Final systems check complete, reported Commander Torres, Sarah's replacement as human tactical coordinator. Sarah herself had been promoted to overall fleet strategy, a position that made excellent use of her species' apparent talent for rapid decision-making under pressure. All ships report ready, added Captain Velkath, the Zelani fleet commander whose conservative nature perfectly complemented Sarah's aggressive instincts. Zara activated the fleet-wide communication system. As the Alliance's diplomatic coordinator, it was her responsibility to address the assembled crews before they entered what would likely be the largest space battle since the Korthak Wars. "Ships of the Alliance," she began, her voice carrying to over 50,000 beings across the fleet. 6 months ago, most of us had never heard of each other. Today, we fight together for a principle that transcends species, technology, or territorial boundaries, the right of all intelligent life to exist and grow without fear of extinction. She paused, looking around the bridge at the mixed crew that had become as close as family. The hegemony believes that might makes right, that advanced technology gives them the authority to determine which species deserve to survive. Today, we prove them wrong. The target was the hegemony's primary construction facility, a massive complex where they built the warships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Intelligence suggested that destroying it would set back their expansion by years, possibly long enough for other species to organize effective resistance. It was also the most heavily defended location in hegemony space. "Jump initiated," announced the navigation officer. "Emergence in 30 seconds. Zara felt the familiar sensation of hyperspace transition, but this time, it was accompanied by something she had never experienced before, the knowledge that she was part of something larger and more important than herself. Around her, beings from across the galaxy worked together with a precision that would have been impossible just months earlier. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, catching the hegemony defenders completely off guard. For almost a minute, there was no response from the massive construction platforms and defense stations. Then alarms began blaring across every enemy installation as they realized what they were facing. "Hegemony fleet responding," Torres reported. 230 vessels moving to intercept. "Outnumbered," Velkath observed calmly, but not outmatched. What followed was unlike any battle in recorded history. Instead of the traditional exchange of long-range weapons fire, the Alliance fleet broke into smaller units, each employing the tactical doctrines of their home species. Human ships darted in close for devastating attacks before disappearing into the confusion. Zelani vessels used their superior technology to strike from unexpected angles. Vrenon defenders formed protective screens that allowed other ships to operate with impunity. But it was the coordination that made the difference. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship would be. Every commander anticipated their allies' actions. Every crew member understood their role in the larger strategy. The diversity that should have been a weakness became an overwhelming strength. "Primary construction facility is taking damage," reported the sensor operator, "but the main defensive platform is still operational." The defensive platform was the key to the entire operation. As long as it remained active, its massive weapons could destroy any ship that came within range of the construction facility. But it was also the most heavily protected target in the system. "I'm taking a squadron in," Sarah announced over the command channel. "Negative," Velkath replied immediately. "The approach vector is too dangerous. We need to find another way." "There is no other way," Sarah said firmly. That platform has to go down, and we're the only ones fast enough to get through their defenses. Zara watched the tactical display as 12 human ships broke from the main formation, accelerating toward the platform at speeds that pushed their engines far beyond safe limits. Hegemony fighters moved to intercept, but the humans had learned new tricks in their months of cooperation with other species. Instead of fighting through the defensive screen, they used Zilani stealth technology to become nearly invisible, Freenan's shield harmonics to deflect incoming fire, and their own tactical genius to thread the needle between destruction and success. Human squadron has reached the platform, Torres reported, his voice tight with concentration. They're going for a direct assault. What happened next would be studied by military strategists for generations. Instead of trying to penetrate the platform's shields, the human ships synchronized their attacks to create a resonance cascade that turned the defensive systems against themselves. It was a technique that required split-second timing and absolute trust between pilots. It worked. The platform's destruction sent shockwaves through the Hegemony fleet. Without their primary defensive system, the construction facility was vulnerable to the Alliance's coordinated assault. Within minutes, the massive complex was breaking apart, its incomplete warships tumbling into the system's star. Enemy fleet is withdrawing, Velketh announced. All Alliance ships maintain formation and prepare for pursuit. But Sarah's voice cut through the celebration. Negative on pursuit. We've accomplished our objective. Let's not turn a victory into a disaster by overextending ourselves. It was a very human sentiment. Take the win and live to fight another day. But Zara noticed that none of the other commanders argued with the logic. The journey home was subdued. Despite their victory, everyone understood that this was just the beginning. The Hegemony would adapt, would rebuild, would continue their expansion, but something fundamental had changed in the galactic balance of power. Casualty reports, Zara asked as they settled into hyperspace. 17 ships lost, 43 damaged, Torres replied. But considering what we were up against, those numbers are almost miraculous. The crews. 437 confirmed dead, 812 wounded. Each number represented lives lost, families destroyed, futures that would never be realized. But they also represented something else. Beings who had chosen to risk everything for the principle that the galaxy should belong to everyone. Later, as the fleet celebrated their victory and mourned their losses, Zara found herself in the observation deck with Sarah and several other senior commanders. Through the transparent aluminum, stars wheeled past in the familiar patterns of hyperspace. So what happens now? Asked Colonel Threntok of the Andorian Defense Force. Now we keep fighting, Sarah replied simply. This was just one battle. The war will probably last for years, maybe decades. And you're prepared for that? Velketh asked. Sarah's smile was tired but determined. We're human. We're prepared for whatever it takes. Zara studied her friend's face, seeing the exhaustion and determination there in equal measure. Sarah, can I ask you something that's been bothering me? Sure. When you first offered to help us back at the council, you said this wasn't about what our species could offer each other. What did you mean? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. I meant that some things are more important than what we can get out of them. The right of intelligent life to exist, to grow, to become something greater than it was, that's not negotiable. It's not something you trade away for safety or comfort or convenience. She turned to face the group. Every species in this alliance has something unique to contribute. The Zilani have wisdom and technology. The Vreenan have resilience and determination. The Andorians have courage and honor. Humans, she paused, considering. Humans have stubbornness, I guess. The refusal to accept that anything is impossible if it's worth doing. Is that why you fight? Threntok asked. Stubbornness? Partly, Sarah admitted. But mostly we fight because we remember what it was like to be alone in the galaxy, to think we were the only intelligent life in the universe. When we finally found out there were others out there, it was the most amazing discovery in our history. The idea that the Hegemony wants to reduce that diversity, to make the galaxy smaller and emptier, that's something we can't accept. Zara felt something shift inside her, a final piece of understanding falling into place. With humans at my side, I knew fear for the first time, she said quietly. What? Sarah asked. Something I realized during our first encounter. Before I met your species, I had never been truly afraid. The Zilani are too cautious, too prepared for every contingency. But with you, I learned to fear losing something precious, not just my own life, but the possibility of a galaxy where beings like you exist. The observation deck fell silent as each commander contemplated the implications,